Order, please rise for the entrance of His Worship Mayor Michael Fougere.
Good evening, everyone. We'll start the meeting with a prayer. We beseech Thee, Lord, to bestow wisdom upon members of this council, in order that their decisions may be founded in justice and prudence. Amen. Please be seated. Move for the agenda revised.
I'll move the agenda with the additions from the clerk.
Okay, seconder for that, please. Okay. Councillor Hinks, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the minutes from the meeting held November 27th and December 8th. Motion for that, please. Councillor Hawkins, seconder, please. Councillor Frondera. Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We will now go to our first delegation, D14-106, Brian Saunders, Robert Byers. If you could please come forward and tell us who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions from members of council afterwards.
Mayor Fougere and members of City Council. It is an honour to be here representing Robert Byers, President and CEO of Namrand, and also the Board of Namrand, and on the subject of the sale of 2301 11th Avenue. My name is Brian Saunders. I'm an architect with some 40 years of active experience in the practice of architecture in Regina and further afield. My position with Namrand for the last 3 years is design architect and development consultant. The delivery team working with me and for Namrand consists of all Regina-based consultants: Patterson MGM Architectural Services, BBK Engineering, McPherson Engineering, Rittenberg and Associates, Clifton and Associates, Myers Norris and Penny, who are our business planners, and PCL Construction as cost consultants, and the general contractor. This represents a team that together has completed a number of large, cost-effective and successful projects in Regina. Through competitive bidding process, Namrand has recently purchased from the provincial government the site adjacent to 2301 11th Avenue at 1840 Lawn Street. The acquisition of the 11th Avenue site from the City of Regina at the appraised fair market value will complete the land assembly necessary for the construction of Namrand's new multi-use building, currently consisting of 170 affordable residential units, 190 underground parking stalls, grocery store, children's daycare, and retail space. The design and viability of this proposed building has been thoroughly examined and tested over the past 3 years, and is a model that is very similar in operation to the successful Woodwards development in downtown Vancouver. Sustainability has been an important requirement of Namrand from the outset of this, and it applies not only to our responsibility to the environment, but also to the operation and financial longevity of this project and the organization. In bringing forward this innovative project, Namrand fully appreciates the major step that it is taking. It has been and will continue to be vigilant of the risks involved and the mitigations necessary to reduce these risks to a minimum. Where budgeting is concerned, Namrand, for instance, is carrying a 7% contingency sum, as well as a 0.3% per month inflation figure. Over the expected 3-year period of its creation, it is estimated that this project will provide considerable economic drivers to Regina, including approximately 530,000 direct hours of employment for the construction and design team elements, plus many spin-off hours involving Namrand, material suppliers, and others. Namrand is a not-for-profit organization, and all surpluses derived go back to supporting the mandate of the organization, that is, to provide good quality, affordable and well-maintained housing for people who might not otherwise be able to afford such desirable accommodation. Since 1977, Namrand has, through careful and successful management, provided and maintained a growing number of affordable houses in Regina, presently in the order of 250 houses. On examination, Namrand's experience and success in this challenging endeavour speaks for itself. It is intended that the grocery store, daycare and retail areas of the building will be placed on the ground floor, together with setback main entrances to the building as well as landscaping. An additional 25 parking stalls will be located off the lane, together with access to underground parking and enclosed garbage storage. Above the ground floor will be 4 floors of Class A commercial office space. The affordable housing units will be placed in 2 11-story towers, each tower with indoor amenity areas at the 6th floor level. Housing will consist of 1, 2, and a few 3-bedroom units. Units will be made accessible on an as-required basis,
Mr. Saunders, you have 1 minute left.
complying at least with applicable bylaw requirements. Each tower will have an enclosed mechanical penthouse. The design of the building, cost estimates, business planning, and administrative requirements have already been taken to advanced levels so as to ensure at least an adequate and detailed assessment of the project, not only for the planning, design, approval, and construction stages, but also for the short and long-term periods of operation, maintenance, upkeep, financing, and reserve fund necessary for continued, full, reliable service. It is intended that during the operation, regular review updates will be performed to ensure the project remains on track and reliably viable. Your approval, allowing Namron to purchase 2301 11th Avenue, is vital to the development of this very worthy project. This will help alleviate, but not entirely remove, the need for more quality affordable housing in this community. We hope that others will follow our lead, whereby this model of affordable housing is self-reliant and sustainable. We do appreciate the affordable housing incentives already available, and we do intend to comply with the applicable requirements so that this project will qualify for established assistance. We wish to thank the administration.
I'm sorry, your time is up. You may be able to provide more information on questions, but I have to stop you there. I'm sorry. Are there questions of the delegation? Councilor O'Donnell?
Thanks very much. Good evening, gentlemen. Pleasure to have you here. Although we're talking tonight about the purchase of a piece of property, you've obviously spoken a little bit about what your plans, and I want to ask you a little bit more about your plans. So I'll begin with the property that's on Lawrence Street. Does it stand as it will, or does it come down so that you can build up?
It is demolished.
Demolished.
Yes.
Thanks. Based on what you've said about the number of suites and so on, how many people do you expect to live in the building?
It's difficult to say because some families are larger than others, but obviously maybe single people live there, as well as young married couples, as well as seniors.
Right.
And so it's rather difficult to say, but if one takes an average, probably about in excess of 300 people.
Good. Others have talked about a grocery store in the downtown. There may be some applause behind you about a grocery store. I'm asking, does this development help to make a grocery store viable? Is that part of the notion that would justify a grocery store?
Yes, it is part of the notion. We feel that it will provide the people living in the building with the supplies that they need for their family. As well, of course, it's well located for others who do not live in the building itself to use the grocery store to make life more convenient for them in the downtown.
Perfect. I want to ask about the parking spots that are surface level. I'll call it in behind, I'm assuming at the alleyway. Are those come and goes so that people can run into a grocery store or do some shopping and then exit, or what's the intent of those ones?
We want as many of those to be come and go as possible. We also have to think of depending on the staff of the retail, what parking they will require. This has to be worked out, I believe, with all the tenants in the building, but I think it's important to have, and this is being discussed with Namron, it's important to have as many parking stores available for people that come and go, for instance, shopping at the grocery store.
Sure. And can you remind me how many are underground? How many
190 cars underground.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to give you the law ball question. What's the impact on our downtown by having this development there?
Well, I think for some years the affordable housing has been talked about, and here is an opportunity to provide affordable housing in the downtown, which I think creates a very good and very positive impact. It's certainly, if you look at many cities in Canada, I think this sort of project would be an envy of them, and certainly Vancouver. I know the Woodwards development there has proved to be very successful in helping people in the downtown, and also bringing to downtown a greater business and a greater number of people. I think the parking in itself, if you look at that, is very much needed in the downtown. And I think the daycare is also a very important need. I hear many people say we need a daycare in the downtown. So I think the impacts are all very positive, especially given that there are other residential developments in the downtown that need sort of assistance with grocery store, and with the children they may have can stay in the daycare during the day.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Other questions? Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. You mentioned there was enclosed garbage. Are you planning on recycling as well?
Absolutely. That's part of the environmental sort of impact that we're looking at, and sustainability of the building, of course.
Perfect. What about accessible units? How many of those are in the building?
As I said, we will comply with at least the requirements of the bylaws, and of course, if there are additional units needed as they're rented out, then of course NAMRIN has its own forces to modify those units to suit the particular requirements of the people that may go there. Different people have different handicaps, so it's very difficult to design up front for every need, and some are very specific and very special. And so NAMRIN will indeed provide the accessible and barrier-free accommodation wherever required.
Thank you. And all of the units will be rentals, no owner?
No, all rentals, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other questions? I have a couple of questions. And as a nonprofit housing provider, could you speak to the issue of the market you're trying to reach for below market housing? Because I'm assuming part of the project is market housing to drive the cost down for the below market or affordable housing. Just a comment on what market you're trying to reach and how many units would be in that category.
Well, what we're trying to do is pretty much what we're doing now, and that's just providing affordable housing. It's the commercial and retail space that will support that. The way it works now is we support our affordable housing through our social enterprise. So we knew that with the continuing need for affordable housing, we were going to have to, if we were going to develop, it had to be a sustainable development, and this had to be a part of it, a mixed use.
That's good. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Burnett. It's your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, gentlemen. Certainly appreciate and like the looks of this project. Just one question in terms of timelines. Will you be in a position once, if this sale goes through, to start development and start moving forward right away, or do you require, I guess, sort of leases and making sure the commercial's all signed up, or other fundraising before you can start the project, or are you just ready to go?
Well, assuming that the sale does go through and we're able to assemble the land, we want to be in a position to develop all the contract documents and tender that and bid that, so we have a fixed price before the project starts. Only in that way can we be sure what the price is going to be, and that the funding that is made available for that. I suspect that if things go as we expect, that by the May of next year, construction would start, and it'll probably take about 2 years to construct the building. There are many ifs, ands, buts to do with weather and things like that, but that's our feeling. I think that provides a very fair amount of time. So I would say that early in 2018 that the project would be occupiable.
Very good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. No other questions? Thank you. You can return to the gallery, and we will now go to our next delegation. It's D14-107, John Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins, I know you're familiar with the process. If you can state your name, who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Regina City Council. My name is John Hopkins, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Regina District Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight regarding the sale of 2301 11th Avenue. Your Worship, over the past few years, our Chamber has had a well-established relationship with NAMRIN Housing through a range of activities, including our First Nations and Métis engagement strategy, as well as our Paragon Awards and a number of other initiatives. What I can tell you about the organization is that they are cutting edge in relation to the provision of affordable housing throughout this great country of ours. Namron is a leader in the use of social enterprise, which in turn dedicates profits from commercial operations back to the provision of affordable housing. Among the business activities of the organization are commercial holdings, a retail operation, a service company, as well as the management of a significant number of residential properties. The culmination of the mix of nonprofit and commercial operations is the provision of additional housing for those in our community who need it the most. Your Worship, it is our view that the housing crisis that we had up until recently has been resolved primarily through a market response as well as through the incentives you have provided. Currently, we have an ample supply of market rate housing on the MLS system as well as a large selection of new homes. On the rental side, we have moved from a crippling vacancy rate of around 1% to a rate of 2.5% or perhaps even higher depending on how one measures the vacancy rate. However, while the market has responded, we continue to have challenges with affordable housing options where waiting lists are long and additional supply lags demand in a major way. The sale of the land outlined in the report will be used to address some of the demand that is out there in our community. It will be done in such a way that market rates will be used to subsidize affordable housing units in a unique symbiotic fashion, which is both exciting and intriguing. Not only will the project provide for additional affordable housing, but also a daycare, additional office space, as well as perhaps a long-awaited grocery store downtown. In addition to addressing affordable housing, Namron's plan clearly meets the objectives of the downtown plan, as well as the OCP. In so many respects, this project meets the needs of our community and should be supported. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll answer as many questions as I can.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for your presentation and the questions. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Welcome. Monday night. Where else would we be?
Again.
So I asked a question of the previous delegation. I want to ask your interpretation. If this project goes ahead, although I know we're just talking about land sale, but we have an idea what it would be, and you referenced it. So what's the impact on our community?
Well, I think it's a very positive impact in terms of it provides more affordable housing units in our community. That is in need. There are long waiting lists, whether it's with Namron or other housing providers in this city, so it will be very, very positive from that perspective. The other thing it will do is it clearly meets sort of the downtown plan in terms of encouraging more housing downtown. So it'll have a huge impact in terms of the downtown plan and creating that goal, I think, and I think it's still the goal. Maybe I've just been away from it too long, but I think that when I was at Regina's Market Square so many years ago, the goal was the 24-hour city. The 24-hour downtown, pardon me. And I think it moves us in that direction. The more people we have living downtown, the better it's going to be. But that's not just part of the proposal as I understand the proposal. The other aspects of it are a grocery store downtown. So I just did some crude sort of thinking about the question that you asked them. And, there's not a grocery store downtown for the seniors complex. That's just, a block or so away. They'll be very helpful for that. We have the Hamilton, that was the conversion that we did so many years ago. We have the Motherwell building, that was another conversion so many years ago. The Willoughby and Duncan building, a conversion again to residential, so many of the upper floors, so many years ago. So there actually are quite a number of people that actually live downtown where, it looks like there might be some good support for, a grocery store. The other thing, and I've heard this a lot of times, is a daycare downtown. And the proximity of a daycare in that location, look at all the office towers that are right around there. It would be great for parents to have a place like that for a daycare. The other thing, and I don't know the project well enough, but I would say this.
Just what we hope will be a walkable area. And I think it also sets the tone for this side of the city because there are a couple of seniors complexes there and they want to be out and about, and this will give them another place to go. So I think this is good. The other part about it, and I appreciate Mr. Hopkins coming forward to speak about this, is that the business plan that Namron uses is really an interesting one and probably as descriptive, not like anywhere else in Canada. That's called a surety from my point of view. They do all the right things for the right folks, but they do it from a business case. I think it's incumbent upon us to support this. I do not have any issue with selling the appraised value property to them directly and not going to a public sale, because as described by your questions, it serves the needs of our OCP. This is how we incent. This is one of the tools in our toolbox. This is one of the ways that this thing goes forward. I'll finish with one comment, and I realize you should never do this. This is a personal comment. I had the good opportunity to work with the architect who spoke before. I have nothing but respect for the man, and I think the idea of flexibility and understanding is part and parcel of who he is. This is going to work. I look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councillor Flater, can you take the chair for a moment, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I have just a few comments in strong support for this proposal, and I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of facts that were pointed out here. Following our OCP and, of course, our downtown plan, we're looking to increase our population downtown by 10,000 people over the next 25 years as part of our downtown development plan. This definitely meets the mark, no question about that. What I like about this project, of course, is that there is a vacant lot that's there, now a vacant building that will be assembled into one parcel. And I like the idea of the commercial and the retail, in this sense, even the grocery store, will be used to make those units affordable. And what's so important about that is that this is a very expensive place to build compared to other parts of the city. But therefore, the risk that's going on the shoulders of NAMRID is significant, yet they're talking in terms, as I heard from the delegation, of a fixed price so they know when they're going in what they're going to be having here. So they have clearly spent a lot of time over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years developing this model, which has been used by NAMRID and other places that works very well. So this stands us in very good stead. This is exactly what we need for downtown. We do need a grocery store, yes, daycare, yes. We need a vibrant downtown that meets our OCP objectives of a 24/7 downtown that's livable, and have more and more of a critical mass of people living downtown is critical. So I have nothing but good things to say about this. With respect to the land, I'll reiterate that as well, that this is a strategic objective of council, is to develop downtown. So to sell this to a partner without going out for general tender is exactly why we do this. We do this for Habitat for Humanity and other organizations that deal our public policy objective. So with me, this is no issue. This is a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other speakers on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll move on to CR 14-142. Councillor Flagel.
I speak loud anyway, so. That for the term of from January 2015 to December 31st, 2015, Russell Irick, Ryan Johnston, and Corey Doka are appointed to the pest control officers. And within 14 days of City Council passing the amendment to the bylaw 2009-71, that the City Clerk notify the Minister of Agriculture of the appointment of the pest control officers as required by the Act. We move concurrence.
A seconder, please. Councillor Hawkins, any comments or questions on the report?
Thanks.
Councillor Fraser.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks. Just quickly, I'm not sure why this comes to council. Does anyone have a quick comment? It seems like something left over from a century ago.
Under the Provincial Act, we have to do it. Who wants to comment on that one? Mr. Davies? Oh, we're pointing fingers, okay. Oh, you have the solicitor.
Your Worship, this question has been asked before, and there, as some may recall, a request was made to the province to give us the flexibility to make these appointments without them having to come to council. In the case of noxious weeds, we were granted the authority to delegate that, but in the case of these particular appointments, the province chose to maintain the current appointment process with City Council. So it's in legislation.
Okay, thanks. I don't want to take more time than that, other than just, I guess I will. Then one more question. Do we have a mechanism for getting rid of old bylaws? I remember when we were running for council, part of the bylaw that governs rules around the election said we couldn't hire horses, Like, I feel like there's probably, our books are full of old bylaws. How do we get rid of old bylaws that don't make sense anymore? not necessarily speaking to this one, and I'm sure these folks will do a fine job with their jobs, but do we have some mechanism for that?
This to the solicitor, I think, would, or Mr. Schoberg, you want to try that one? If you're ready to answer that one.
Your Worship, I'll make a comment, and the solicitor may want to add, but simply put, I guess there's two primary processes. Council can obviously identify changes required and ask for reviews. In addition, administratively, we're working through processes to try and identify timelines for bylaw review. So, as an example, upcoming, the zoning bylaw is going through a more thorough review. So we'll be doing that periodically with the various bylaws in place.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so you don't want to debate who's been appointed. Okay, good. Other speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next report is CR 14-143. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. On behalf of Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, I will move 14-143, which is the 2015 alley maintenance strategy and special tax levy funding options. And this, I will move all of the recommendations, which brings paved alleys to $3.85 per accessible foot and gravel alleys for $2.71 per accessible foot. And this is something that if it costs X amount of dollars, that's how much we charge. So that's what comes here every year.
Okay. A seconder for the report, please. Councillor Murray. Comments on the report. Councillor Murray.
Your Worship, I just want to speak briefly to the idea of having this policy in place. The ability for us to be able to replace alleys and keep them up and maintain them is frankly better than their streets are because we have this program in place. So those of us that would have a paved alley, we're going to pay a little bit more. But the reality is my paved alley is in better shape than my street is because there is actually a policy in place to be able to replace them. If our residents want to see us get our roads done, we may have to actually consider doing something like this, where in front of your home, we're going to have to add an X amount in order for us to be able to replace your roads. This is a great policy, it's a great plan, and it's a great way for us to maintain the streets and roads. A great way for us to maintain our alleys and alleyways. It would also potentially be a way for us to look at doing our streets and roads. I think it'd be something to look at in the future, although I think it may be a little unpopular because nobody wants to pay more for something. But the reality is we just don't have enough to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other speakers on the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Can I have clarity, please? Do we have this program at a different amount in operation currently?
Ms. Gasmo, do you want to?
Through you, Mayor, can I have a bit more clarity on the question?
So, do we not already charge people who have alleys, paved or otherwise, a fee for alley maintenance?
That's what this is, I think. This is
That's what this
no,
is.
This is it.
But, yeah, I understand.
Yes.
Gasmo?
So this, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is the rate that changes the rate in which those who pay right now pay, and it just accounts for the increase in the operating costs.
Yep. I knew this, so I'll tell you why I asked the question. The calls that I received were not about whether or not they have been paying and so on, but the advertisement in the paper read a special levy, and they assumed, my residents assumed, this was on top of the already existing levy. So my simple request would be that we look at wording as to how this appears in the future. So, all good.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. On page 2, it notes that this includes a 22% corporate overhead. Could someone just explain what that corporate overhead is? Thanks.
Ms. Gasmo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is the cost for covering things like administration, HR, communications, etc.
Okay. Is that sort of divided? I take it that's sort of all over overhead. Like we apply this 22% to a lot of different areas. Is that right?
Mr. Archer.
Your Worship and members of council, the method for calculating the overhead rate anticipates different units of service depending on the area you're talking about. IT, for example, would be based on the hardware and network space that gets used versus facilities, which would be based on square footage, for example. So those types of unit costs will vary across the services depending on how much they consume of them.
Okay.
But yes, the expectation is that across the board there is a uniform method for applying the overhead rates. And then council, of course, has the discretion always to set those rates based on its judgment, including that detail.
Thank you. And do we have some sense of how we compare to other cities when it comes to corporate overhead? Is 22% a reasonable rate compared to other like cities?
Your Worship and members of council, what constitutes a corporate overhead rate depends on many factors, including the organizational structure. Some municipalities have, within their operating departments, embedded IT services versus ours, which is a centralized corporate IT service. So the rates would vary depending on whether they're classified. It's a classification exercise. I'm sorry for sounding technical. This is, at the end of the day, on the broadest perspective, as we discussed during our budget deliberations, a set of costs that are on balance lower per capita than most other municipalities in the country.
Okay. Okay, great. That's good to hear. So the only concern I have out of this, the report mentions that we'll start charging this tax to 180 properties in the city that are only flanked by an alley. Do we have any sense of if those properties have access to the alley, or how many of them have access to the alley?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, these are all properties that have access to the alley. The difference is instead of backing the alley, the alley's on the side of the property.
Okay, that's my only concern, that if somebody's flanked by an alley but they don't have access, I'm not really sure if it's fair to make them pay for it. I'm not really sure it adds value to their life or their property. So, so long as all 180 have access, I plan to support the report as is. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers? I have a question of the administration, and I know that there's a 30-year strategy for the paved alleyways to be done, and a 10-year for the gravel. What in that program? How is it affected by now having recycling in the back lane, and how does it change the life cycle costing, and the time we repair? Any change to that at all, Ms. Gizmo?
Your Worship, the impact of recycling collection and solid waste collection on back alleys is due to the heavy trucks that travel up and down it, so that will impact the life cycle of the alleys. What we will be looking at is ways to preserve those alleys and maintain them a bit more frequently so that we can increase the longevity of those alleys.
So does a 30-year for asphalt and 10-year for gravel, do those times still apply?
They're roughly be about the same. Gravel alleys just maintain more frequently because of the kind of structure that they have.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that. Other speakers? Councillor Bryce, do you want to close debate? Okay. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two bylaws, and I believe we have a minor change in the report, number 72. Councillor Flegel?
You're saying there's a slight change?
It would be in 72, the year is 2015 or 14 under levy.
Yeah.
That would be number 3, if you could make that amendment.
Yeah. Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaw number 214-72 and 214-86 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider these two bylaws, 214-72 respecting the levy of a special tax to raise money for alley maintenance, and 214-86 respecting the appointment of pest control officers. If there is anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council at this time, I would ask that you indicate as such. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll call the question on reading number 1. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flegel?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaw 2014-72 and 2014-86 be read a second time.
We should have a change, an amendment to that. Councillor Bryce?
Thanks. I will add an amendment to it that in reference to throughout the report or throughout the bylaw, there is reference to the year 2014, and that should be changed to 2015. And there's a number of spots in that in the report that needs to be changed, so the city clerk is aware of it.
Sure. A seconder for the motion, please. Sure. Councillor O'Donnell, to the amendment. Any speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll do second reading as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flegel.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that council hereby consent to bylaws 2014-72 and 2014-86 going to a third reading at this meeting.
Any comments on this reading? As amended, yes.
As amended.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that bylaw 2014-72 and 2014-86 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Executive Committee reports. Councilor Flagel for the 2015 elected official committee appointments.
CR 14-144 at Exec Committee. Recommendations of the Executive Committee on December 3rd were that City Council approve the elected members' appointment to the committee summarized in Appendix A, that all the appointments be effective January 1st, 2015, with terms of office to December 31st, 2015, unless otherwise noted, that members appointed continue to hold office for the term indicated or until their successors are appointed. Recommend concurrence.
A second or further report, please. Okay, Councillor Hinks seconds that. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flagel.
It's Executive Committee. Thanks. CR 14-145, appointment to the Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District Board. Executive approves that Mr. Craig Witherspoon, J.P. Ellison, John Fettis, Mr. Derek Yan be appointed as citizen members of the Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District Board for the term of January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2014. Also that Ms. Carmen Daiwad, Ms. Sarah McRaven, and Mr. Thomas Williams be appointed as citizen members of the Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District Board for the term of January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2017. Members continue to hold office for the term indicated or unless successors are appointed.
Second or further report, please. Okay. Councillor Murray. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Flagel.
Also, CR 14-146, Council and Committee meeting schedule for 2015. That City Council, Community Protective Services, Executive Finance, Mayor's Housing Commission, Public Works and Infrastructure, Regina Appeals Board, and Regina Planning Commission be all approved as a calendar schedule for 2015.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Seconder, please. Councillor Young. Comments or questions? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Didn't pick this up before. On July the 3rd, Regina Planning Commission has a 10 a.m. meeting. Is that on purpose, or is that?
Just want to see if you're paying attention.
Yeah. So
You
is there a reason why we're meeting at 10 in the morning? I'm not opposed, by the way.
Perhaps I can talk to the clerk about that. Mr. Clerk? You just highlighted too.
Your Worship, yes, I believe we would have done that consciously, perhaps to facilitate a timely meeting that day.
Okay.
I mean, it's in the middle of the summer and the long weekend. And the committee assistants have reviewed this, and that was our understanding. But again, it can easily be revised if that doesn't work as we approach July.
Not a problem. I didn't pick that up before, thanks. And the other thing I note on here is, and I seek clarity, do we have one council meeting a month, is that right? So if business arises and we need more than one a month, how does that work?
Through you, Your Worship, as always, meetings can be scheduled at the request of council. So again, based on the work that is arising from committees, notably the Regina Planning Commission, we can call meetings to facilitate whatever requirements there are.
But having, except for January, obviously, that I see here, but we usually have more than one a month. So the recommendation is based on what?
Mr. Clerk?
Again, Your Worship, through you to members of council, we reviewed this schedule with you. We looked at a number of options, and this mirrors what went on in 2014.
Okay.
So with the exception of the odd one where there's a bit of a bump, we also, because of the changes to specific committees, notably Executive Committee and Planning Commission are not on the same day anymore, and to also facilitate the appropriate public notice so that meetings have a duration time of almost 2 weeks for delegations to hear and then appear before council. That's where it comes in. So we tried to mirror this as largely or as close as we could to 2014, keeping in mind that we can always call special meetings as required.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Any speakers, further speakers on this report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 149.
CR 14-149, appointment of the Board of Directors for Regina Downtown bid. And on behalf of the nominating committee, Mr. Dave Morhart, Doug Kozlowski, Ms. Charlene Gavel, as persons who are electors of the city or are employed in the district of terms, effective January 1st, 2015, expiring December 31st, 2017. Also that Mr. Aaron Murray, as a person who is an elector of the city or are employed in the district for terms, will be effective January 1st, 2015 and expiring December 31st, 2016. Recommend concurrence.
Seconder for that, please. Councilor Burnett. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next report is the walk-on that we had put forward. This is the citizen appointments to committees in 2015. Councilor Flagel.
Thank you. CR 14-150 is a citizen appointment for the committee for 2015 that the following individuals be appointed to the Regina Public Library. Darrell Lukey be appointed for a term of office effective January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2015. So for 1 year. That the following individuals be appointed for a term of office effective January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2017, and that members continue to hold office for the term indicated until their successor is appointed. And those people are Elmer Brenner, Cindy Kobayashi, Barbara March Borwell, and Jervin Weeks. Also, and there's a whole list of.
Yeah.
Do we need to go through them all?
You probably should read them, yes. Since
Okay.
you're started already.
Number 2, that Noel Jeremiah be appointed to the Development Appeals Board for a term effective January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2017. The following individuals be appointed to the Board of Police Commissioners for a term of office effective January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2015. Victor Pankratz and Gordon Sellinger. That Fred Clipson be appointed for Wascana Creek Shed Advisory Committee for a term of office effective January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2015. Following members to the Planning Commission, Ron Okamura, Mr. Darrell Poussain, Ms. Kathleen Spat be appointed for a 2-year term starting January 1st, 2015. Pam Dimitru, Mr. Phil Evans, Adrian Hagan Lister be appointed to a 3-year term effective January 1st. And the list goes on and on, Mr. Mayor.
Go on, keep going.
And then the following individuals will be appointed for the Board of Revisions for the term of office as indicated below. Anja Coswell be appointed for a 1-year term effective January 1st. Mr. Walter Antonio, Miss Linda Paddle, Miss Cyril Keston be appointed for a 2-year term effective January 1st, 2015. Ms. Joanne Moser, Mr. George Peters be appointed for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2015. That the members be appointed to the board, committee, and commissions continue to hold office for the term indicated for each vacancy until their successors are appointed.
Thank you, Councilor.
All recommend concurrence.
Thank you, Councilor. Can we have a seconder, please? Councilor O'Donnell. Questions or comments on this report? Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the list of names that's been recently just put before Council. And I would also, however, like to move an amendment to the walk-on motion in the following terms. Whereas the City of Regina's vision statement and official city plan speak of Regina as Canada's most inclusive community, and whereas women and minorities have much to contribute to the boards, commissions, and committees that play a vital role in governing our city, be it resolved that 1, the city clerk be directed to prepare a report for submission to City Council in first quarter 2015, examining the gender and diversity makeup of the nominations for and the makeup of the representation on the boards, commissions, and committees on which at least one city councillor sits, and 2, that the city clerk review current procedures for recruitment and nomination to those boards, commissions, and committees with a view to ensuring appropriate gender and diversity representation on those agencies, and 3, that the mayor of the City of Regina be directed to write on behalf of the city to all of those boards, commissions, and committees, stressing the importance of appropriate gender and diversity representation and urging their best efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Can I get a seconder for that, please? Councillor Fendera?
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this amendment is to ensure an examination of the representation on our boards and agencies, to make certain that in terms of gender and diversity, we're doing as well as we can in attracting talent from all of the various peoples and groups that make up the city. There's much talent to be offered in all of the groups. It's also important that if the city is to have confidence in its boards and agencies and commissions, that it see reflected in the face of those agencies the face of the City of Regina. The motion in no way requires quotas. It in no way dictates what representation should be. It simply asks that we examine our commissions, boards, and agencies to ensure that the representation is fair and appropriate in all of the circumstances. It also directs the city clerk to examine the procedures which we use for nomination to those committees, boards, and agencies, and to ensure those nominations follow a procedure which is not only open, but which in certain cases recruits where recruitment is necessary in order to improve the representative qualities of our committees. So for those reasons, Your Worship, I move the following amendment to the motion before Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Any speakers to the amendment? Sounds like a reasonable request. I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Other comments on the report as amended? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I would like to say two things. Want to acknowledge all the people that applied for our civic committees. Not only do I think that we had a significant number of them, but I think we had some very, very highly qualified members of the community apply. So I want that noted. Second thing is that I think Council has taken the right approach, and that is that we have made some change to our committees. By that I mean we've had some long-standing people on committees, and we've now got, I think, a process in mind anywhere where we rotate people around. And you'll see that there have been 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year appointments, and that lends itself to change as well. So we welcome people to continue to apply, but also we welcome change. Thank you.
Any other speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CR 14-147, Finance and Administration. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward this report, and it's in regards to the newspaper advertising agreement. Recommendations coming from Finance and Administration Committee of December 2nd are three, and the first, that the Chief Legislative Officer and City Clerk be, or his designate, be authorized to negotiate and approve the terms of new advertising agreements with the Regina Leader Post beginning in 2015 and expiring December 31st, 2015. Such agreement will include printing and distribution of the city's leisure guide for 2015 and the option for the city to renew and extend the agreement for consecutive 1-year terms for 2016 and 2017. Your Worship, Part 2, that the Chief Legislative Officer and City Clerk or his designate be authorized to negotiate and approve the terms for any renewals of advertising agreements with the Regina Leader Post for 2016-2017. And a third part, that the Chief Legislative Officer and City Clerk be authorized to execute the agreement, and any renewals or thereafter after review with the approval of the City Solicitor. Those are the three parts, Your Worship, and we look for concurrent.
Seconder for the report. Councillor Flagel. Comments or questions? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question for the administration. I just want to make sure that there's nothing in this motion which would restrict the administration's ability, should technology change and produce different circumstances in our advertising requirements, that there's nothing here or in the agreements that may be negotiated that would prevent us from moving technologically forward as circumstances change.
Mr. Holden.
Through you, Your Worship. I guess, we recognize obviously that media habits are changing. People look for information in different ways, whether that's print media, whether that's online access, whether that's social media. So the significant change is that we're doing this for a single year. Our previous arrangements with the Leader Post agreements have been multi-year. So we will negotiate for 1 year, and we'll constantly continue to monitor and evaluate the mix, and then of course we'll have some flexibility in terms of making changes as we approach negotiations for both 2016 and 2017 if we continue to pursue that arrangement with the leader post.
Thank you, Your Worship. With that assurance, I'll support this motion.
Thank you. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Murray, do you want to close debate? Oh. Councillor Fraser, sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I rise in support of this motion. Just wondering, I know we have a very active Facebook and Twitter account. Do we post official notice online? Like, our contract with the leader post is about when we have to post things officially that there's a building permit or something like that. Do we do that online as well?
Mr. Holden?
Through you, Your Worship, we use a variety of means. So obviously we do have Facebook, we do have Twitter, as well as Regina.ca. So we use a variety of means to complement what we do through the leader post.
Okay, but let's say that somebody has a building permit and we legally have to post it. Do we only post it, like for sure we put it in the leader post every time, but do we for sure put it online every time?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? Comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move on to the septage receiving station. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I'll move CR 14-148, which is the septage receiving station, SRS. I'll move that administration proceed with the design and construction of a new septage receiving station that is capable of meeting. This just blacked right out on me as I'm holding it. Sorry, I just need to go back to the Stone Age here. Okay.
Didn't take that long, did it?
No, it did not. Sorry. It just shut right down on me, so halfway through a sentence. So, that is capable of meeting existing customer service levels that can be expanded based on future growth needs as outlined in option 3. The current estimated cost of this facility is $10 million. The annual operating cost is estimated at $258,000, including costs for permit management related to the facility. Number 2, that the administration return to council in 2016 to recommend a permit system and septage user rates based on actual construction costs and amendments to both sewer service bylaw and the city's extra municipal servicing policy. If I could have a second.
Seconder, please, for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hinks.
This $10 million is in the reserve, so it's not something that we have to come up with. And this is a user pay sort of system that we're looking. The city needs this for part of their working process, but we also have customers that utilize this right now for free, and we need to make some changes to the system that we have now, so that's what we're doing here. This will be a user pay, and it will pay for itself.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers? Councillor O'Donnell, then Councillor Hawkins.
Thanks. So a few years ago, the septic station used to be at Oriole Place. Oriole Place is off MacArthur Boulevard, and it sits in the heart of Ward 8. And then we had the wisdom to move this out of the city, basically out to where it currently sits, and that was good. The second part of that, though, is that at that time, so there's a few years now, we always talked about this notion. So I have a question first. So to the administration, of the services provided, what's the percentage of in-town service versus out of the city boundaries of Regina service?
Ms. Gasmo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll have Ms. Wilson help us answer those questions.
Through you, Your Worship, it's approximately 85% of the use, we estimate, is for out-of-town customers.
When we have within our building permit system, do we have any houses that go up that have septic tanks within the boundaries of the city of Regina?
Ms. Wilson, do you want to try that?
Through you, Your Worship, no, we do not.
No, we don't. Okay. So I simply trying to make a point. We have stood here, all of us, many times and talked about regional planning. This is an investment by the citizens of Regina in the regional growth pattern. This is an invitation to all the communities outside of Regina who have septic systems to be part and parcel of this. This is an invitation to show beyond good faith that the city of Regina has initiated that they too can be part and parcel of a solution that will help the overall area. I accept the invitation.
Thank you, Councillor Donnell. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions. At the risk of delving too deeply into this subject matter, can the administration tell us what septage is?
Skill testing question. Ms. Wilson? Oh.
Through you, Your Worship, without getting into too much details, septage is basically where your wastewater goes when you're not connected to a collection system within the city.
Pretty succinct answer.
And my second question, Your Worship, following on is, why isn't this something that was covered by the wastewater treatment plant? How is this different than the wastewater treatment? Why didn't we do it all at once?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, with developing the P3 project, as we did at the wastewater treatment plant, it's important to establish risk where it is best managed, such as ours. The intention would be to provide a usable system at a fair price, and haulers are, generally speaking, have good incentive to use a system like that, as provided it's available.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I support the motion. I think this is an important facility to build.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions for administration here. Can someone please explain what cost recovery means?
Okay, Mr. Archer.
Your Worship and members of Council, cost recovery means as plainly as that, the recovery through fees or some other channels, but other revenue sources for the costs directly incurred or indirectly incurred by the corporation for providing the service.
Okay, so will this cost recovery include the $10 million or thereabouts we'll have to put out for capital?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, Councillor Fraser raises a question about asset renewal in asking this question, that we anticipate on a prospective basis fees would incorporate the capital renewal charge. Historically, there's been mixed practices in place, and we haven't always recovered fully the capital costs. In this case, I believe we've incorporated the capital in the fees.
So to be clear then, that's the initial capital, or that's the capital renewal we've incorporated? Will this pay for the initial $10 million?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship, members of Council, forgive me if I wasn't clear. This incorporates the initial $10 million.
Okay, thank you for that. Does it incorporate the 22% admin overhead that we talked about in an earlier agenda item?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, yes, it does.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Also, can we relate this to our contract with EPCOR? I appreciate Councillor Hawkins' questions earlier. We had a good answer about why we're taking the risk on for this. But can we just relate, can you relate this to our P3 contract with EPCOR? Okay, I can make that a little more clear, I'm sorry. So ultimately, this has nothing to do with our P3 contract. We're paying to build this, and the cost recovery will pay for the capital and the operation of this plant. And then ultimately, once the water enters the system, it's treated by EPCOR, and our contract with EPCOR the same as any other water would be in the system. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, yeah, certainly that's true in this case. The project is not of significant size.
Okay.
$10 million typically is not a significant enough project, as well as referred. In both cases, we assessed who's best able to manage the risk, and in this case, it is the city that's best able to manage the inflow.
Okay. Is there any major risk about somebody coming along and being able to do this for cheaper in the region? I mean, if most of this is coming from outside of the city, is there any chance that in the next 10 or 20 years, a surrounding municipality or town might come up with an option that comes in cheaper than this?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, I'll provide a comment, and Ms. Wilson may be able to add based on her experience in working with other municipalities on this project. I would suspect the answer is no, in the sense that on a scale that's contemplated here, the surrounding municipalities certainly don't have the financial wherewithal other than receiving additional provincial support, possibly. That's not to say they may not have certain solutions in terms of wastewater, but in terms of septage, receiving this is not necessarily a service that most jurisdictions are looking to get into.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if Ms. Wilson had anything to add to that.
Through you, Your Worship, Mr. Schoberg is absolutely correct. Unless there were to be no solution offered by the city, it's unlikely that another town would be interested in getting into this business. First of all, they would need to maintain some technical expertise that is more likely to be available in a city the size of Regina.
Okay, thanks for that. One final note here. The report mentions that this wouldn't deal with grease traps, or FOG is the acronym. I'm not sure what that stands for, but we're talking mostly about things from hydrovacs, really mud from excavating with the hydrovac and septic waste. It mentions that right now the city is investigating options for grease traps, in essence, for McDonald's and all these other places that use deep fryers. Can we just have a brief update of what happens to that material right now?
Mr. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship. So currently, the grease traps, ideally what would happen is that the top portion of the grease trap, so what we call kind of liquid gold, would be pumped off and taken to Saskatoon where they're reprocessed and used for a value-added product. And then the brown grease can be solidified and hauled to the landfill.
Okay, I don't know if this requires an official motion, but I might just ask that the Environmental Advisory Committee be included in this conversation. It mentions that the city's investigating other options. This is an issue that's been brought up several times at the EAC, a subcommittee that I sit on. We've been approached by several restaurant owners who have an interest in this. So I could make a motion, or can I just ask admin to note that?
I'm not sure. Ms. Gasmo?
Through Your Worship, as we do some public engagement and education on this, we can certainly involve them in the process.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers on the report? Oh, Councillor Fundera.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question on how this is going to impact customers of the haulers, because there's going to be there's a new thing that's going to be happening. What's the impact on the customer of the haulers? Is it going to be financial change to them? Who's going to be looking after that, Your Worship?
Ms. Gasmo?
Through Your Worship, the major change to the customer is that they will require a permit verifying that they're a source of material that can be picked up by the haulers and then taken to the septic receiving station.
Okay, so that follows up. Who is going to be notifying? Is that haulers are going to be responsible for notifying, or is that us as a city going to be notifying the customers?
Ms. Gasmo?
Through Your Worship, we do plan to have a fairly extensive engagement process with both haulers and source, those who create the waste. I'll ask Ms. Wilson to add if there's anything else on how we are going to do that process and how they will be informed of the changes.
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, through you, Your Worship, we do expect that we will work through the haulers to provide that information to their customers. At the moment, we don't have those individual relationships with their customers, but as we move towards requiring a permit of the end users, we are anticipating that the haulers will be the ones who provide that notification to their individual customers, and then we will develop that relationship with the end users.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fundera. Any other speakers? Before I turn over to Councillor Bryce to close the debate, I have a question to the administration. It's more on the current septic system that we have here. And as I read the report, there was reference that we really are not always certain what goes into that. So I'm wondering, do we have enough people monitoring? If we don't, will we have people monitoring what's actually being put in the system now before we have the new system put in place? Ms. Gasmo?
Through you, Your Worship, I'll start and then have Ms. Wilson help finish with the response. The current site is more difficult to manage in that it's a fairly open site that haulers can come and go to quite frequently. We do have some process in place to audit individual loads, but we do not check every load that goes into the lagoons. But I'll ask Ms. Wilson to see if there's anything to add to that.
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, as Ms. Gasmo said, we don't have a facility there right now. It is just the corner of a lagoon, and therefore it is very difficult to staff it in a useful way. We do spot checking right now, which is a dip test, which we then have to go away, test for results, and then go back and work with the individual hauler if we find that the load has not met the standards we expect, and we are doing that. With the new facility, it will be a facility where we will have staff housed, and we will be working much more actively at that point.
I'm just concerned about the current status right now and how this may or may not affect the new wastewater treatment plant. Is there any issue we should be addressing, and do we need to have more staff monitor on site? Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, the current location in the lagoon, the lagoons will be decommissioned and will not be part of the new plant, and therefore what is in that corner of the lagoon won't have an impact. What is of more concern is getting haulers and the end users used to using the system appropriately, so that when we are dumping to the new plant, we will have appropriate levels of source control.
Good. Thank you for that. Councillor Bryce, to close debate.
Thank you. I didn't want to leave everybody with the impression that this is just for our regional stuff that we're using. The city utilizes this quite a bit as well for, it's called hydrovac waste, which is part of our sewer cleaning and the clean mud and water mixture that they pick up to do. I'm not going to pretend to know what I'm talking about, but maybe Ms. Gasmo, or through you, Mr. Mayor, could explain what we as a city need this for.
Ms. Gasmo?
Through your worship, you did not a bad job in explaining that. Sewer cleaning is certainly one element of it. The hydrovac is through our construction practices in daylighting different utilities and just gaining better access to different locations or sites on it for our construction.
Okay, great. So we as a city actually need this project to go forward with our growing city as well. I also have a question about fines for dumping. So what if somebody did decide, hey, I'm not paying that permitting fee, or I'm not doing this, and they did dump somewhere? What kinds of fines are in place? Is that something we're taking a look at and making sure they're huge, big fines, because this is a huge environmental impact if they do dump somewhere that they shouldn't? Or anywhere except for this place, I should say, not just somewhere that they shouldn't.
Ms. Gasmo?
Through your worship, we do have a bylaw that does govern us, that gives us the right to prosecute anyone who is not abiding by the bylaw. In the report that we will bring back in the new year, though, with the source control and the new permitting system, we'll be able to fully articulate how that process will work and what things like fines and that will be.
Perfect. I would like to see, when it does come back, some great big huge fines, because it has a huge impact when people aren't doing things like this properly. Just the environment alone is really hard to grasp the impact that it has. So I ask for your support on this report, and hopefully move forward on it.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. She's closed debate, so there's no other speakers. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two motions. The first one by Councillor Flegel.
Thank you. I rise to speak on bylaw 2014-85, the Regina Civic Employees Long-Term Disability Plan Amendment bylaw 2014, whereas City Council considered the above-mentioned bylaw at their meeting on November 27, 2014, and whereas this bylaw was tabled at the meeting in response to a negotiated settlement regarding the employees at the wastewater treatment plant, and whereas it has been determined by the City Council that this bylaw is no longer required in response to the settlement. Therefore, be it resolved that the motion to table bylaw 2014-85 as recorded in the minutes of November 22nd, 2014 meeting of City Council be rescinded. Be it further resolved that I make the following motion for consideration by City Council tonight. Bylaw 2014-85 concerning Regina Civic Pension Employees Long-Term Disability Plan Amendment Bylaw 2014 be removed from the list of amended bylaws.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Seconder, please. Councillor Bryce. Pretty straightforward housekeeping. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next motion from Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. The number is MN 14-6, and the topic is provincial and municipal daycare center regulations. I will read the motion I propose. Whereas both the City of Regina and the Province of Saskatchewan support and encourage the development of daycare facilities, and whereas there are currently differing regulations between the two legislative bodies, and whereas the inconsistencies in the governing relations causes confusion for a prospective daycare operator and may discourage new daycare operations. Therefore, be it resolved that the administration undertake discussion with the Ministry of Education on the provincial licensing requirements for the regulation of daycare centers with a focus on opportunities and recommendations to strengthen the alignment between the regulation of these facilities under Regina Bylaw number 9250 and the licensing provision for daycare center under provincial legislation. Be it further resolved that a report regarding the recommended course of action with respect to aligning the regulations be provided to Executive Committee in the first quarter of 2015. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder for it, please. Councillor Young.
Thanks very much. Just simply put, it has come to the floor of council before, and it's certainly come to people who operate daycare centers in my area that they often go to the province first, do what they're supposed to do at the province, but aren't always encouraged to come back to the city. But yet we have an enforcement ability as well within the city, and it definitely causes confusion. My request is simple, that if we could get together with them, I'll put it this way, if their people could get together with our people, we wouldn't have the same problem. So I'd like to see the report come forward later.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? I'd like to clarify this. This is the licensing of daycares is a provincial responsibility. So we're not talking about downloading the responsibility. We're talking about communication between orders of government where there's a request for a daycare within the city of Regina. So it's just a clarification of roles, not to change who does what. To the mover, Councillor O'Donnell, what's your motion?
That is correct. We're not looking at changing something, but the way that our rules and regulations read are different than what the provinces read. So it's a matter of some clarification as to how we can work together.
As long as we're not taking more responsibilities from the province. We have enough of them already. Other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Last item is an inquiry. Of course, this is not really debated. If I have a motion for that, please.
If I could bring this forward, and I'll just read it. And the topic is regulations regarding transporting dogs in truck beds. Whereas the City of Saskatoon has recently altered its animal control bylaw to regulate how dogs can be transported on truck beds, and whereas transporting dogs unrestrained in truck beds is considered animal cruelty by many of the Canadian SPCAs and the Canadian Veterinary Association, and whereas the City of Regina's current animal control bylaw does not address this issue, therefore be it resolved that the administration undertake discussions with our service provider, the Regina Humane Society, to investigate a change in our animal control bylaw that would regulate how dogs can be transported in truck beds, and be it further resolved that a report regarding the recommended course of action with respect to bylaw changes be provided to Community and Protective Services Committee in the first quarter of 2015.
Thank you. There's no debating that, nor a seconder. I'm going to call for call a procedure, but not to debate the motion. That's the rules under inquiry.
Yep, I understand. I'm just wondering if there's other cruelty items listed that we can include in this, like if it's listed under the SPCA as something that's cruel to animals. Is there anything else that we can include to maybe broaden it a little bit?
Councillor O'Donnell.
The intent of the inquiry is not for a larger scope. The intent is for a specific item here. Having said that, the debate or the discussion can change when it comes back to council.
I'll do that then. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Seconder? Councillor. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. This is the last meeting of council for 2014, so on behalf of City Council, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, season's greetings, and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2015.